The quilting world is full of family businesses. Practically every business owner has a partner at their side as they juggle all the many hats that they have to wear. And it's exciting when children enter the business with their new ideas and their fresh eyes. My next guest, Stephanie Ngai, has grown up surrounded by threads. Her parents are the founders of Wonderfil. In the past few years, she has discovered not only what she can do for threads, but what threads can do for her. So grab your sewing and a cup of tea, and here's my interview with Stephanie Ngai. Thank you, Stephanie, for being on the show today.
A pleasure.
Are you coming to us from Calgary?
Yes, I am in Calgary, Alberta right now.
And you're at the filming studio for Wonderfil, right?
Yes, I am.
I got to visit your office a couple of months ago, and it was wonderful to walk around and see all those colors and all those threads around you. How old were you when you realized your family was in the thread business?
I think it was evolution to actually take in everything that has to do with thread and the sewing industry, because for a long time, I think I understood it from a more superficial level. I certainly grew up watching the business grow. But when I was younger, maybe it was just like helping fold some boxes here and there, coming to visit the office after school. So it wasn't anything very in-depth until after university, I actually came to work here. And in just like the first year, I was really delving into the industry and learning more about thread. My mind was blown on like a daily basis, just learning about not just one technique, but even diving deeper within the technique, the history behind it. And it just, you can really go in a rabbit hole in a million different ways once you start. I still feel like I'm learning every day. So despite growing up with thread around me and everything like that, I certainly still feel like I have a lot more to learn.
Now, as a child and you coming into the office, I know I brought our kids into the office all the time. Did you play with thread? Like, did thread become part of your school projects? Was it like the spools and that? Were they part of your life?
That's an interesting question. I don't know that the thread specifically played a part in my school, but my parents did enroll me in sewing class when I was about 8 years old. And I did take sewing for, I think, about 3 to 4 years. And then in that aspect, I used our thread, but I was really basic. Actually, I just used a 50 weight cotton to do all my little simple projects like PJ pants or pillowcases, the basic line things. And then after that, I actually stopped for a long time, especially when I went into junior high and high school. And I also studied business in university. So being creative kind of slowly seeped out of my life as I got a little bit older. And then in my last year of university, I kind of had this urge to just want to do something more fun. So I took an art class, and I feel like that really reopened and reawoken kind of my creative side to just play around with thread and sew a little bit here and there, but by no means am I an expert in sewing. I just know a lot about thread.
Well, it was fun getting to know both your mom and your dad. They have so much knowledge about thread. Did you realize how much you knew just by being around them?
I didn't know how much they knew, actually. And a big learning curve for me was when I actually started attending trade shows and wholesale shows. And I was assigned to kind of stay on the till. And anytime there was kind of a downtime, I would lean over and listen to what someone was explaining here, and then lean over and listen to what my mom was explaining there. And then over time, I would listen to them and learn about how the thread is applied in different circumstances. And that's really where I gained a lot of knowledge, is when we were educating other people. I was also getting some of that education myself.
I think I met you the first time at a trade show, just walking around and touching all the threads, and you were helping me out. It was nice to see the difference between what a picture of a thread looks like and then coming up and actually seeing samples and having that advice of how to implement them.
Yeah, I really love going to trade shows myself. On a daily basis, I'm like sitting at the office working away. But when I get to go out and actually interact with people, and at trade shows, most of the time people are really happy to be there. They're ready to go shopping and choose their favorite fabrics. And they come into our thread booth, and it's like a big candy store for them. So I'm happy to see them and they're happy to be there. And they often teach me a lot too about sewing too. So I just try to guide them in the right direction for whatever technique or whatever project that they're making.
You haven't been able to do the quilt shows for a couple of years. Are you
Mhm.
back doing them now?
So we're back on the road again. So we started actually with our first show last September in France, and that was also the first time I taught at a show. And then after in January, the US opened a little bit more, so we were going to road to California and of course the AQS shows, and we also attended Quilt Canada as well. So I would say it's about 80% back to normal, with a few shows that we're waiting until 2023 to fully go back to.
What is the question that you hear asked most often at the quilt shows about thread?
A lot of people will just come in and just ask, what thread should I use for XYZ? And it could be for applique or embroidery or quilting. And usually we have to follow up with the question of what's the purpose of this project that you're making? Because that really actually matters when you're selecting thread, whether it impacts the material, like cotton, rayon, polyester, and also the weight of the thread. So you can go with a really fine thread or a heavy thread. So when they ask that question, we have to go into a deeper conversation about what they're really trying to achieve with their project, because a heavily used quilt will be different than an art quilt, for example. So there's that question. And of course, we always get the question, what color should I choose? And that's always, up to the individual. So we can't help too much in that aspect, but we try to give a little suggestions here and there.
What is the most common misconception about thread that you hear?
Hmm.
Or maybe you're just at a show and you hear something wrong. What is the one that you hear the most?
I would say there's probably two, and maybe it could be controversial. So maybe you can take some of it with a grain of salt. The first one is people worrying about polyester melting, and thread has come a really long way in terms of development and quality. So in the past, maybe it could melt, but nowadays polyester is very high quality and it's very durable. So you can actually use it in a lot of different applications. So that would definitely be one. And that's kind of connected to my next point, is people that only use cotton. And this is the one that could be a little bit controversial. And there's nothing wrong with using only cotton. I love using cotton myself. But in some aspects, cotton can't always deliver what a polyester can deliver. So for example, if you're wanting really precision piecing, or if you're doing applique and you really don't want the thread to show through, you want to go to a lighter weight thread. However, cotton can only go to a certain lightweight before it starts losing some of its strength, and you'll get more breakage and you'll encounter more of those issues. So that's when we'll start suggesting polyesters. And for a few, there might be some kickback as to, oh, I don't want to use polyesters, they melt or they'll rip my fabric. But again, the technology has changed a lot with even thread manufacturing, that polyester is not going to tear your seams, and it's also treated to not be so shiny like how it used to be. So in the past, polyester probably only came in a standard 40 weight. When you quilted with it, you could see the thread and you'd see it shine. But nowadays, with our polyesters, at least, we treat it so it's cottonized, which means it's more matte and it'll actually blend a lot more into your fabrics without you seeing it and without it being as obvious. So I would say definitely those two are the biggest, maybe not misconceptions, but maybe misunderstandings that we encounter. And that'll for sure come up at every show that we go to. Yeah.
Well, it's funny. People repeat information that they learned from their mother, who learned it from their mother, and they
Hmm.
haven't updated that information.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
see it all the time in many different parts of quilting. You're like, well, that iron is 20 years old. You know, they fixed that problem many years ago.
Yeah, so that's why we really focus on kind of educating the customer and trying to get them to try little different things and see if they can achieve a better result with a different tool.
So do you get involved in developing any new products at Wonderfil?
I would say in terms of product development, that's definitely still on my father's end. He'll see and develop different tools, and he's really innovative. A lot of the times, I don't even know that it was in development until it comes to us for with prototypes, some testing, some photos and things like that. He's really innovative thinker, and he's always thinking. His mind is always working, and he's always observing what people need, how to help smooth out their sewing issues or their quilting projects. He's always thinking. So although I don't help actually develop the products usually, I sometimes get to test it and play with it and give my input here and there before it becomes a final fully released product.
Do you get involved with the packaging at all? Just looking at the beautiful boxes behind.
Yeah, so when my sister actually joined the company before I did, and she basically opened the marketing department in our company. We had a very small sect before, and when she came, she implemented all our social medias and built a whole marketing team. And so when it comes to packaging, her team also manages that as well. So again, I get to see the prototypes, look for any errors, and then if I have some ideas, I can input it into packaging. But usually I'm just looking at the prototype before final production. And it's been a lot more fun lately because we've collaborated with a lot more artists and teachers, even on a smaller scale. So if they want a little thread package of their own, they can come to us and we'll actually do the work of designing the thread pack for them and have all their artist info or company info on the back. We'll line up all the threads all nice and pretty and allow them to order in that way so they can sell the thread as their own collection with professionally designed packaging. So it looks all nice as a finished product.
So how is it working in a business with your dad and your mom and your sister?
I would say there's definitely ups and downs, but there's more good times than bad, thank gosh. It's a privilege to be able to work with family. I think that's also something I learned over time. I actually thought I was going to go in a completely different industry, be totally disconnected from this company when I first went into university. I studied supply chain and operations. In my third or fourth year, I interned at the company, just doing very basic like data entry type stuff. And when I came out of university too, my parents were kind of like, you should just come to the office and apply for some jobs. And if you have free time, you can do a little bit here and there. And then slowly over time, a little bit here and there turned into more here and there. And then I somehow just was working here full time. And so I've been here since. And like I said, it's really been a privilege. And I really respect my parents a lot. And I see the difficulties sometimes with running a business, but then also the achievements and how fulfilling that is to see something that you've built and made actually come to fruition and have success. And it's been really nice. And what I've encountered too in the industry is there's a lot of entrepreneurs, I think, in the quilting industry and a lot of small businesses. And over time, when we've gone to shows, I'm starting to get introduced to other companies, second generations that are now taking over their business. So it's really cool to watch the industry kind of evolve and change hands a little bit, but still have the experience from our parents or our seniors who passed down the business and knowledge to us.
I think
Mhm.
it's exciting to see you and other second generation people come into the fold. We do business differently now, but we need the institutional knowledge that our parents have.
Mhm.
Um, and how you're going to shake it up just a little bit. I find that there's still not enough women within this industry, which is 95% driven by female consumers. And I am excited to see that.
I'm really excited to see that too. And that's such an interesting point that you bring up because I still consider myself relatively new. I'm still going to all these industry shows or wholesale shows. And despite the market, the consumer market being, like you said, 95% woman, when it comes to the top management, it's still quite unequal in that aspect. So when I do see women in these higher roles, I really look up to them and I really respect what they're doing. And I also support more women going into these roles and taking on these positions.
Are you a sewer or a quilter?
I don't think I can call myself a quilter or a sewer fully yet. I can sew and I have made a quilt, but where I've really found that I'm having a lot of fun is when I'm actually doing handwork. Instead of really delving into the quilting side of things, I just like taking my time and working with my hands on kind of a smaller scale. It's easier for me to manage. And I actually am so amazed when people are putting together the quilts and they're getting the measurements so precise. They're either following a pattern or even if they're designing a quilt themselves, it takes so much brain power and organization, and the thought process is completely different, I think, from my point of view. And then when it just comes to handwork, it's usually a little bit smaller. I have a little bit more control. So that has just come a lot more naturally to me.
I think I saw a sample of yours while I was at your office of a Sue Spargo, do they call them pennies?
Oh, so her pattern, I actually have it right next to me. I think this is the one you were looking at.
Yes, yes.
Okay. So this was actually her 90-day circle sampler, also known as kind of like wool pennies. I actually only did 45 of the days because her whole idea was you kind of did a circle a day for 90 days. However, because I'm a little bit of a perfectionist myself, it ended up taking me 2 or 3 days to do one circle because sometimes I'd do it, take a look at it and be like, it's not quite how I want it. So I'd actually take it apart and redo it until it looked good in my eyes. And what I'm trying to learn more and more is to kind of accept how handwork looks. And even if it's not perfect, I should just still roll with it. So another project I have ongoing right now is Allison Glass is doing a quilt stitch club. And she's just kind of doing a bunch of running stitches on a big quilt. And my inner me wants to measure everything out, make sure all the stitch lengths are the same, all the distance and widths are the same. But I think it's also an important skill to just go with the flow, learn it, let it be organic. And I think it'll still look really beautiful at the end too.
So have you dealt with Sue Spargo for a long time?
Wonderfil actually works with Sue Spargo. We collaborated with her to produce some wool colors, some merino wool colors, as well as some thread colors. She was really what really exposed me to handwork. Sue has come to our office and we've also visited her before.
She's got a lovely setup there in Ohio.
Yeah, she does. I haven't had a chance myself to go to Ohio to see her new shop, but I mean, she's just growing so massively and we're so happy for her. And her following is so strong. So when like we have a lot of like Sue Spargo fans that come to our booth and things like that, and they see all the colors. We have some of her patterns too, and they just again pick away at it like candy in a candy store.
It is. It's like candy in a candy store without the calories.
Yeah, yeah, even better.
I have a box of Sue Spargo stuff because I'm just so attracted to it, but I haven't had the time to do it. I've got another ham project that I'm just in the final stages of, and I cannot wait to get to the Sue Spargo. I want to do the wool pennies. I want to do it all. It just all.
Yeah. And it takes a surprisingly long amount of time. You think, oh, that's a simple little project, but then you're working away and a few hours go by, but your patch has maybe grown to like a little bit bigger. So
I think I remember correctly. Your mother worked on a really big hand sewing project during lockdown too, didn't she?
yeah, so my mom actually also really likes hand stitching too, which is why I probably followed in her footsteps a little bit. But my mom quilts a little bit more. So she has folk tales going on, which is one of Sue Spargo's projects. She's made several Sue's quilts. So she's actually done a lot of Sue Spargo's projects. So you could have seen the pumpkin, the chicks. That's really what brought us both into the world of hand embroidery.
Now you have an older sister in the business too, don't you?
Yes, I do.
Does she do any handwork?
My sister's name is Callista. Yeah. And she does do a little bit of handwork, but I would actually say she is more naturally drawn to piecing, especially foundation paper piecing. So she's made quite a few quilts in that method. So we all kind of cover different sects. I would say we're probably just missing someone that's like very good at fashion and garments.
So do you get together and sew together, or do you do it all separately?
We do both. So before COVID, actually every Tuesday or Wednesday, we would all go to one part of the office and also invite some of the other staff and some other friends that are also in our little like quilting circle. And we'd all have a little project to start and we'd work on it together. And some people are definitely more experienced than others. They would teach us how to do the stitches or show us how to follow a pattern. And that's how we would gather in the office. And then in the non-office times, my mom would probably just assign this little baggie is for you to stitch. This little baggie is for Callista to stitch. And that was our little homework. And we'd each bring back a block so she could put her quilt together.
So do you find you use color differently now?
I think so. I've always been a little bit more safe with my matchy, but the more that I'm exposed to going to quilt shows and seeing how people use color and attending a few classes myself on color theory and how colors go together, I feel I'm exploring a little bit more than I used to in the past. I still have to push myself a little bit because I am rather safe of a quilter / embroiderer / sewer, but I'm totally an amateur still. I would consider myself. I'm just very open to trying different things, trying a little here and there, trying needle punch here, like wool embroidery there, some quilting. I've even delved into some knitting and things like that and how to incorporate different fibers into my work, but that's really a whole different ballpark.
So what color are you attracted to first?
That's tough. I would say in terms of color palette, I'm always drawn to bright colors. I love rainbowy things. So when Allison created her Cantha Stitch Club, so I brought the quilt, it's completely rainbow all the way through and it's much larger than this, but I was like, oh, I have to do that. Then I can use as many colors as possible. And I'm really lucky to have access to so many different threads. So I can really choose all the bright colors I want and put them into a quilt. And I don't actually keep a lot of what I make myself. I usually give it back to the company, the marketing team, and then we'll use it as samples when we go to shows or go visit stores. And that actually motivates me a lot to create more, is because I feel like they have a purpose and they won't just be sitting in the corner of my office or something like that.
Now, you've mentioned Allison Glass a couple of times. Is she a designer that actually works with Wonderfil?
Yeah, so Allison Glass works with us on the level that we have 4 boxes of our eleganza pearl cotton thread with her. In that aspect, we work together and we've created some displays for her as well. So the stores can actually order a display of eleganza with all her colors because she has really specific bright colors and displayed in their store. So that's kind of why I'm bringing it up. And then she has this stitch along at the same time. So
well, she has beautiful colors. I like them because they're not red. They're slightly an orangey red, and it's not a perfect green. It's that limey green.
Yeah, you're exactly right. It's just there's something unique about it, but they all mesh so perfectly and they look so beautiful as a collection.
Well, I like how she supports her fabric too. Like she's always doing something that's distinctly her, but a little bit different.
Yeah, that's correct.
I'm always amazed at how much room there is in thread work. People who like precision and precise, and people who don't want any rules and any stress. It's feeding their brain a totally different way. And then there's other people that want to push the measurements, and there's other people that want to follow the rules
Yeah.
and follow the instructions.
Yeah.
And there's just room for everybody.
Mhm.
You have those down times when it just becomes your helpline to mental health.
Oh yeah, that's for sure. I think without even me actively noticing, doing hand stitching has really helped me sometimes get over like some stress that I'm having, or even help me rebuild some motivation and help me step out outside my comfort zone. Because for example, I was doing hand stitching because it was something I thought was fun. And when we went to the show last year in September, there was the opportunity and offer for me to teach there. And I don't really have a public following myself. I would say people know who I am from going to shows, but that's about it. And I don't actively teach either. That would have been my first time teaching anything to anyone, let alone in French. So I was nervous for probably like 2 or 3 months leading up to the event. I was over preparing every single detail I could have. And when the show started and I was just teaching the students, it was kind of like what we call like a make and take, so they can come sit for about an hour and a half, and then they can go with their project. When it really started, things were happening so quickly that the days would just go by so fast. And at the end of every day, I just think to myself, oh, I did it. Like I can do it. Like it wasn't so bad after all. And I am again like exposed to new cultures. I get to meet so many people within one day. And that really encouraged me a lot. So in April, they were running the same show again. So I taught again there. And then my third time actually was just this past Quilt Canada. And it's all just kind of simple hand stitching type things. I actually ended up really enjoying teaching, and I don't think I would have been able to do it had I not pushed myself, and I wouldn't have that opportunity had I not just like taken the time to learn how to stitch and rely on stitching sometimes when you're upset or not in a great mood.
I find hand stitching also really good when you've got a problem. Whatever reason, it allows space for that problem to just sort of, let's say, relax. And you access a different part of your brain, and sometimes it can get solved, or it just gives you hope that you're going to be able to solve it.
I would agree, definitely. When I sometimes feel in one of my happier influxes, I'm always doing something creative, whether it's drawing or doing hand stitching, even just finding some sort of creative outlet to let go of stress. And I don't even think I really realized the importance of exercising your creativity until I was working here, and probably not even until the last few years where I was doing more and more hand stitching, where I think having a hobby is so important and having a creative outlet is so important, especially when I see my mom doing her stitching. I feel it really fulfills something in me when I see her doing something that she likes to do. That's why I really encourage people to just, chase the hobby that makes you happy. It's supposed to make you happy and not stressed out. And that's also why I'm trying to train myself to accept imperfections in my own work and be okay with it. I'm just making it. It's handmade. I definitely used to be a lot more obsessive with it, but I think it's important to let go a little bit.
I really find it fascinating how you think everything's been done. And then people come along and they reinterpret. They say, well, let's just do this and let's do that. And you get such new, beautiful, amazing results.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. And, sometimes we go to these modern quilt shows and we go to more traditional ones too. And even just seeing how people are just buying the same fabrics, just different colors and all the different art that they can make. And it's so different. It's so incredible.
So does Wonderfil have a YouTube channel?
Yes, Wonderfil has a YouTube channel with tons of educational resources. We also have some videos on there from our thread talks that Calista and I have done in the past, where we do deep dives onto specific thread lines or some specific techniques, and we really go into the nitty-gritty detail of those. So you can check those out. And we also have some additional videos that feature thread lines or little mini projects or just overall information about thread. So the YouTube channel is just Wonderfil's Threads, and you can find all the videos there.
And if anybody wants to reach out to you specifically, how do they get a hold of you?
So if anyone wants to reach out to me or reach out to Wonderfil, if you have any questions whatsoever, thread related, me related, or anything, you can just email hello@wonderfil.net.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show today, Stephanie. It was good to see you.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
I hope you've enjoyed my interview with Stephanie Ngai. At your next quilt show, be sure to stop by the Wonderfil booth and say hello. You can also find Stephanie and her sister on Thread Talk on the Wonderfil YouTube channel. I'll leave a link to that in the description notes below. I'll also leave Stephanie's contact information as well. Next up on Karen's Quilt Circle is Brandy Maslowski of the Quilter on Fire podcast. She is a textile artist, a teacher, and a quilt show judge. So you know I had 1,000 questions. You don't want to miss it, so be sure to subscribe. Next time you're in your sewing room, be sure to have Karen's Quilt Circle playing on in the background. I have interviewed so many amazing people on this show. Let one inspire you. And if you haven't signed up yet, my Sewing Room Declutter Challenge starts January 1st. Click on this link to join. Take care, and I'll see you next time.